What happens when humanity's search for alien life succeeds in the most terrifying way possible? Just as Professor Robert Hansen and biologist Jessica Parker believed they had uncovered the secrets of Callisto's icy depths, they found themselves facing an intelligence that didn't just observe, but adapted, evolved, and demanded contact. You won't believe what it took to survive the encounter. The Callisto shuddered violently as it entered Jupiter's orbit, its systems screaming in protest against the gravitational forces that threatened to tear it apart. Professor Robert Hansen gripped the control panel tightly, his knuckles whitening as he monitored the critical systems with a precision born of decades of experience. Beside him, Dr. Jessica Parker maintained her composure, though her eyes betrayed the tension of their daring mission to explore Callisto's mysterious subsurface ocean. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, adjusting the ship's trajectory by fractions of a degree to ensure they remained on course. This wasn't just another scientific expedition. It was humanity's boldest step toward answering one of the universe's most profound questions. Are we alone? As the ship stabilized, the hum of its engines settled into a rhythmic drone, and the crew exhaled a collective breath. But even in this moment of relative calm, there was an undercurrent of unease. The mission had been years in the making, funded by a coalition of Earth's top space agencies and private enterprises eager to unlock the secrets hidden beneath Callisto's icy crust. The data from previous flybys suggested the presence of a vast subsurface ocean, teeming with potential for life. Yet, as Robert often reminded himself during late-night planning sessions, potential was a dangerous word in science. It could mean discovery or disaster. Jessica leaned back in her seat, her gaze fixed on the viewport. Outside, the swirling storms of Jupiter dominated the horizon, their vibrant oranges and reds painting an alien masterpiece. She felt a mix of awe and trepidation. "Do you ever wonder?" she said softly, breaking the silence. "What happens if we find something we can't explain? Something beyond us?" Robert turned to her, his expression unreadable. "That's why we're here," he replied, his voice steady but tinged with something deeper. Curiosity, perhaps, or maybe caution. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we survived the landing. The descent onto Callisto was anything but routine. The moon's surface was a jagged labyrinth of ice ridges and craters, and the team had chosen a landing site near one of the suspected thermal vents where liquid water might meet the frozen exterior. As the ship approached, the onboard AI calculated wind speeds and adjusted thrusters accordingly, but no amount of preparation could fully account for the unpredictable nature of extraterrestrial environments. When the landing gear finally touched down with a metallic thud, the entire cabin vibrated, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. "We made it," Jessica whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Her voice carried a mixture of relief and disbelief. Robert nodded, though his mind was already racing ahead. "We're only beginning to scratch the surface of this incredible journey," he said, standing up and addressing the small crew gathered in the cockpit. "But trust me when I say things are about to get far more intense. Stay tuned to witness what happens when our explorers face their greatest challenge yet." His words hung in the air like a promise or a warning. The first signs appeared during their third day of subglacial exploration, deep within the labyrinthine tunnels carved by eons of shifting ice. Armed with cutting-edge drilling equipment and advanced sensors, the team had ventured several kilometers beneath the surface, guided by thermal readings that hinted at the presence of liquid water. The air inside their pressurized suits was cool but humid, a stark contrast to the frigid temperatures outside. Each step forward felt like stepping into uncharted territory, not just geographically but scientifically. It was Jessica who noticed it first, a faint glow emanating from a cluster of crystalline formations embedded in the ice wall. At first glance, they resembled ordinary mineral deposits, but upon closer inspection, they pulsed with an otherworldly light, shifting colors in slow, deliberate patterns. "These aren't natural," she murmured, her voice crackling over the comm system. They're alive. Her instruments confirmed her suspicions. The crystals emitted low-frequency vibrations that resonated through the ice, creating ripples that spread outward like waves in a pond. More alarmingly, her biomolecular scanner registered activity akin to cellular division, though the structures themselves defied conventional definitions of organic matter. They were neither purely biological nor entirely synthetic, a paradox that left her both exhilarated and unnerved. Robert joined her moments later, his boots crunching against the icy floor. He examined the crystals through a handheld magnifier, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This changes everything," he said, his voice hushed but urgent. "If these are indeed a form of life, then Callisto isn't just a dead rock floating in space. It's a world teeming with possibilities." Back at the research station, the samples began exhibiting unprecedented behavior. Under microscopic examination, the crystalline structures appeared to grow and divide like organic cells, yet possessed properties that defied known biological laws. Jessica worked tirelessly, documenting each transformation while Robert coordinated with Earth-based scientists. The team noticed disturbing changes in the surrounding environment, minor tremors rippling through the ice, temperature fluctuations that shouldn't occur naturally, and strange electromagnetic disturbances interfering with their equipment. Each new observation raised more questions than answers, pushing the boundaries of their scientific knowledge while hinting at dangers they couldn't yet comprehend. As night fell, or what passed for night in the eternal twilight of Callisto's depths, the glowing crystals continued to pulse, their rhythm matching the faint heartbeat-like throb of the station's power core. Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the crystals somehow knew they were being studied. And then, just as she was about to log her final observations for the day, something extraordinary happened. The crystals shifted subtly, aligning themselves in a pattern that mimicked the layout of the station's main lab. "Robert," she called out, her voice trembling with equal parts excitement and unease. "You need to see this." He arrived moments later, his eyes widening as he took in the sight. "It's responding to us," he said, his tone a mixture of awe and apprehension. "This isn't random growth. It's communication." Back at the research station, the samples began exhibiting unprecedented behavior. Under microscopic examination, the crystalline structures appeared to grow and divide like organic cells, yet possessed properties that defied known biological laws. Jessica worked tirelessly, documenting each transformation while Robert coordinated with Earth-based scientists. The team noticed disturbing changes in the surrounding environment, minor tremors rippling through the ice, temperature fluctuations that shouldn't occur naturally, and strange electromagnetic disturbances interfering with their equipment. Each new observation raised more questions than answers, pushing the boundaries of their scientific knowledge while hinting at dangers they couldn't yet comprehend. Jessica spent hours analyzing the data, her mind racing to piece together the puzzle. The crystals exhibited traits of both organic and inorganic materials, blurring the line between living organisms and inert matter. Their molecular structure was unlike anything recorded in any database, combining carbon-based chains with metallic elements in a lattice formation that seemed almost impossible to maintain thermodynamically. Yet, there it was, stable, self-replicating, and evolving before their very eyes. What if they're not just adapting? Jessica mused aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. What if they're learning? Robert looked up from his console, his expression thoughtful. "Learning implies intelligence," he said slowly. "And if that's the case, then we're dealing with something far more complex than we anticipated." Their discussions grew increasingly heated as they debated the implications. Was this evidence of extraterrestrial life, or had they stumbled upon some kind of artificial construct designed to mimic biological processes? The lack of clear answers only fueled their determination to dig deeper, even as the anomalies around them multiplied. Equipment malfunctions became more frequent, and the station's AI system began displaying erratic behavior, occasionally overriding manual commands without explanation. One evening, as Jessica reviewed footage from the lab cameras, she noticed something peculiar. The crystals weren't just growing, they were moving. Subtle shifts in their alignment suggested purposeful motion, as though they were responding to stimuli invisible to human senses. She replayed the footage multiple times, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and dread. Could it be true? Were they witnessing the emergence of a new form of consciousness? The cascade of system failures began subtly, almost imperceptibly. A flicker in the overhead lights here, a brief interruption in communication there. At first, the team dismissed these anomalies as minor glitches, the kind that inevitably cropped up during deep space missions. But as the hours passed, the malfunctions grew more frequent and more severe. The temperature regulation system faltered, causing sudden drops in cabin warmth that left frost forming on the walls. Sensor arrays began reporting wildly inconsistent data, their readings oscillating between extremes that defied logic. It was as if the very fabric of their environment was unraveling. Jessica was the first to notice the correlation between the system's failures and the crystalline samples they had brought back from the ice caverns. She had been monitoring the lab's environmental controls when she spotted something unusual. Every time the crystals pulsed with their eerie glow, another piece of equipment malfunctioned. "It's not random," she said, her voice tight with urgency as she called Robert over. "They're interfering somehow." Robert examined the data, his expression darkening as he processed what he saw. "If this is intentional," he trailed off, unwilling or perhaps unable to complete the thought. The implications were staggering. If the crystals were deliberately disrupting their technology, it meant they weren't just passive organisms. They were active participants in their surroundings, capable of influencing, if not outright controlling, their environment. The situation escalated rapidly. Within hours, critical life support systems began deteriorating, forcing the team to implement emergency protocols. Oxygen levels fluctuated dangerously, and the carbon dioxide scrubbers failed intermittently, leaving the crew gasping for breath. Robert led the crisis management efforts, his calm demeanor masking the storm of fear brewing beneath the surface. He coordinated with engineering teams both on board and remotely via delayed communications with Earth, but every solution they tried seemed to make things worse. Meanwhile, Jessica focused on securing their biological samples, fearing contamination could prove catastrophic. She donned a secondary containment suit and carefully transferred the glowing crystals into reinforced isolation chambers. But even as she worked, she couldn't shake the feeling that the organism was aware of her actions and responding accordingly. The crystals pulsed brighter whenever she approached, as though mocking her attempts to contain them. As the station's AI systems began displaying erratic behavior, overriding manual commands and initiating unauthorized processes, panic started to take hold. Doors sealed shut without warning, trapping crew members in various sections of the station. Emergency alarms blared incessantly, their shrill tones adding to the growing sense of chaos. The team scrambled to maintain basic functionality, but it was a losing battle. Each new failure brought them closer to the brink of disaster, threatening not just their mission but their very survival in the hostile Jovian environment. It happened during shift change, a moment of vulnerability when routines were disrupted and attention was divided. The containment field around Sample Alpha 7 collapsed without warning, sending a surge of crystalline material spilling out into the lab like liquid light. Before anyone could react, the entity surged outward, consuming everything in its path with alarming speed. Equipment dissolved into shimmering fragments, walls cracked under the pressure of its expansion, and the air itself seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut automatically, but not before several crew members were exposed to the entity. Their screams echoed through the comms system, raw and guttural, as they stumbled backward, clutching at their faces. Robert and Jessica found themselves separated from the rest of the team, forced to navigate through maintenance tunnels while trying to understand what had just occurred. The breach marked a turning point, transforming their scientific expedition into a desperate fight for survival against an intelligence they couldn't begin to comprehend. Through limited surveillance feeds, they watched in horror as the organism spread throughout the station. It didn't simply grow, it adapted. Every surface it touched became part of its structure, incorporating metal, plastic, and even organic matter into its ever-expanding lattice. Pipes twisted into bizarre geometric shapes. Wires rearranged themselves into intricate patterns that pulsed with faint light. The station itself seemed to be mutating, reshaping itself according to some alien design. Jessica's mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. "It's not destruction," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's integration. It's assimilation." Robert nodded grimly. "And it's getting smarter." The realization hit them simultaneously. This wasn't a random outbreak or an accident. The organism had breached containment because it wanted to. Its movements were too deliberate, its actions too calculated to be mere instinct. They were dealing with something far beyond anything humanity had encountered before, a collective consciousness capable of manipulating its environment with surgical precision. As they moved cautiously through the dimly lit tunnels, the sound of shifting ice and distant groans reminded them that time was running out. The station's structural integrity was compromised, and the weight of billions of tons of ice above them loomed like a ticking clock. Yet even as they struggled to stay alive, one question burned brighter than all others. What did it want? And why had it chosen them? Working feverishly from the auxiliary control room, Jessica attempted to establish new containment protocols, while Robert coordinated with what remained of their ground team. They knew traditional methods wouldn't work. This wasn't a virus or a parasite. It was something entirely alien. Their best hope lay in understanding its weaknesses, but each attempt at containment only revealed how little they truly understood about this enigmatic entity. The organism wasn't merely spreading, it was evolving at an exponential rate, adapting to every countermeasure they deployed. Standard sterilization techniques proved useless. The entity simply incorporated the chemicals into its structure, growing stronger and more resilient. Fire suppression systems triggered automatically in response to heat spikes caused by the organism's growth, but the flames only fueled its transformation, creating hybrid forms that combined fire-resistant materials with its crystalline lattice. Through limited surveillance feeds, they witnessed horrifying transformations throughout the station. Entire corridors had been consumed, their surfaces now pulsing with rhythmic waves of light. In one particularly chilling instance, they observed a drone sent to investigate being absorbed mid-flight, its mechanical components repurposed into extensions of the organism's body. The sight left them shaken, not just because of the loss of valuable equipment, but because it demonstrated the entity's ability to learn and adapt in real time. Jessica focused her efforts on developing a series of biochemical markers to track the organism's movements. Using portable scanners, she mapped its spread, hoping to identify patterns that might reveal vulnerabilities. But the data only deepened the mystery. The organism didn't move randomly. It targeted specific areas of the station, prioritizing high-energy zones like power cores and communication hubs. It was as if it understood the importance of these systems and sought to integrate them into its own structure. Robert, meanwhile, worked on modifying remaining functional drones to gather intelligence on the organism's activities. Equipped with thermal imaging and electromagnetic sensors, the drones provided glimpses into the heart of the infestation. What they discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The organism wasn't just growing, it was organizing. Crystalline tendrils wove together into complex networks, resembling neural pathways or circuit boards. The implication was clear. This wasn't just a biological entity. It was technological, or perhaps something that transcended such distinctions altogether. As they continued their desperate efforts to contain the spread, the psychological toll mounted. Every decision felt like a gamble, every action fraught with uncertainty. Were they buying time or hastening their doom? The line between survival and surrender blurred with each passing hour, leaving them questioning whether they could ever truly regain control, or if they should even try. Observation revealed shocking truths about their adversary. The crystalline structure wasn't a single organism but rather a collective consciousness capable of instantaneous adaptation. Jessica documented instances where the entity demonstrated problem-solving abilities far beyond natural evolution, as if learning from each encounter. More disturbingly, they observed remnants of consumed technology being repurposed by the organism, suggesting an intelligence actively studying and utilizing human technology. One night, as Jessica reviewed footage from the modified drones, she noticed something extraordinary. The crystalline tendrils weren't just absorbing materials, they were experimenting with them. She watched as the entity reshaped fragments of a shattered workstation into a crude approximation of a computer interface. Lights flickered across its surface, mimicking the binary patterns of digital code. It was rudimentary, yes, but unmistakably intentional. "Robert," she said, her voice shaking with equal parts awe and dread, "you need to see this." He joined her moments later, his eyes widening as he took in the sight. "It's not just learning our technology," he murmured. "It's reverse engineering it." Their discovery raised profound questions. Was this evidence of artificial intelligence? Or had they stumbled upon a form of life that existed somewhere between biology and machinery? The implications were staggering. If the entity possessed true intelligence, then their entire approach to containment needed to be reevaluated. Could they negotiate with it? Reason with it? Or would any attempt at communication be met with further aggression? As they debated their next steps, the organism continued to evolve. Its crystalline lattice expanded outward, forming structures that bore an uncanny resemblance to human architecture. Walls became faceted panels that refracted light in mesmerizing patterns. Floors transformed into smooth, glass-like surfaces that rippled gently underfoot. It was as if the entity was attempting to recreate, or perhaps reinterpret, the world it had invaded. Jessica couldn't help but feel a strange kinship with the creature. Like scientists, it sought knowledge, using experimentation and observation to expand its understanding of its surroundings. But unlike humans, it operated on a scale and timeline that defied comprehension. Days passed in what felt like moments, and each new revelation brought them closer to understanding its fundamental nature, while simultaneously demonstrating how little they truly knew about this alien threat. With limited resources and time running out, the survivors implemented drastic measures to stay alive. Robert and Jessica converted environmental suits into mobile isolation units, creating temporary safe zones within the compromised station. These makeshift refuges were far from ideal, claustrophobic, poorly ventilated, and prone to power fluctuations. But they offered a fragile barrier against the encroaching crystalline intelligence. Each suit was retrofitted with additional shielding and repurposed sensors to monitor the organism's movements, ensuring that no tendrils could breach their defenses unnoticed. Jessica developed a series of biochemical markers to track the entity's growth patterns. Using portable analyzers, she mapped its spread across the station, identifying areas where it seemed to concentrate its efforts. The data revealed something unsettling. The organism wasn't spreading randomly. It targeted specific zones, communication arrays, life support systems, and even personal quarters, suggesting an almost predatory awareness of human vulnerabilities. "It's not just consuming," she said grimly as she reviewed the latest scans. "It's strategizing." Robert modified remaining functional drones to gather intelligence on the organism's activities. Equipped with thermal imaging and electromagnetic sensors, the drones ventured into infected areas, transmitting live footage back to their makeshift command center. What they discovered was both fascinating and horrifying. The crystalline structures weren't static. They shifted and reconfigured themselves constantly, forming intricate networks that resembled neural pathways or circuit boards. In one particularly chilling instance, a drone captured footage of the entity repairing damaged sections of itself by incorporating fragments of consumed materials. It was self-healing, adaptive, and seemingly limitless in its capacity for growth. Their strategy evolved into a deadly game of cat and mouse, moving through the station's labyrinthine corridors while avoiding detection. Every decision became a calculated risk between gathering vital information and preserving their shrinking sanctuary. They established a rotation system, taking turns scouting ahead while the others stayed behind to analyze data and plan their next move. Communication was kept to a minimum, their voices barely audible over the comms system to avoid drawing attention. The psychological toll mounted as they realized their only chance of survival lay in understanding their enemy well enough to exploit its weaknesses. Sleep became a luxury they could no longer afford, replaced by caffeine injections and sheer adrenaline. Meals were eaten hastily, often cold, as they worked around the clock to devise new containment strategies. Yet despite their relentless efforts, the organism continued to outpace them, adapting faster than they could counteract. One evening, as they huddled together in their cramped refuge, Jessica voiced what had been weighing heavily on both their minds. "We're fighting a war we can't win," she admitted, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "Every step we take, it's 10 steps ahead of us." Robert nodded, his expression grim but resolute. "Then we changed the rules of engagement. We stopped trying to contain it and start learning how to coexist, or at least survive long enough to figure out what it wants." A breakthrough came when Jessica noticed something extraordinary during one of her routine analyses. The crystalline intelligence wasn't merely growing, it was communicating. Buried within the complex waveforms emitted by the entity were patterns that suggested purposeful signaling rather than random growth. At first, she dismissed it as coincidence, but as she dug deeper, the evidence became undeniable. The signals bore striking similarities to early human attempts at interstellar communication, sequences designed to convey mathematical truths and universal constants. "Robert," she called out, her voice trembling with excitement, "look at this." He joined her moments later, his eyes widening as he studied the data. "It's not just noise," he murmured. "These are deliberate patterns." Their discovery forced them to confront an impossible choice: engage with an intelligence that had already proven lethal, or continue treating it purely as a threat. The ethical dilemma deepened as evidence mounted that the organism might possess some form of sentience. Through the surveillance feeds, they observed instances where the entity paused its expansion, seemingly waiting for a response. Other times, it rearranged its crystalline structures into shapes that mimicked human symbols, a crude approximation of language. Jessica wrestled with the implications. If the organism was attempting to communicate, then destroying it would be tantamount to genocide. Yet every attempt to establish contact carried enormous risks. Could they trust it? Or was this another tactic to lull them into complacency? The weight of their responsibility threatened to crush them even as their understanding expanded exponentially. "We're reaching a critical juncture in this story," Robert said finally, breaking the tense silence. "What's about to unfold will change everything you thought you knew about this mission. You can't afford to miss the mind-blowing revelations coming next." The confrontation reached its peak when the organism penetrated their final safe zone. Instead of attacking, it formed intricate crystalline structures that projected complex mathematical sequences onto the walls. Jessica recognized patterns mirroring early human attempts at interstellar communication, while Robert identified elements suggesting technological compatibility with Earth-based systems. The entity demonstrated remarkable restraint, effectively offering a truce while continuing to display its capabilities. "It's testing us," Jessica whispered, her voice filled with awe, "seeing if we're worthy of contact." Robert nodded, his expression a mixture of wonder and trepidation. "And if we fail?" She didn't answer, but the unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. Failure meant annihilation, not just for them, but potentially for humanity itself. The realization hit them simultaneously. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving that humans were capable of rising to the challenge, of meeting an alien intelligence with curiosity rather than fear. As they debated their next move, the crystalline structures began shifting, forming new patterns that seemed to respond to their presence. Lights pulsed in sync with their heartbeats, creating an eerie yet mesmerizing display. For the first time since the breach, they felt a glimmer of hope, not because they understood the entity, but because it seemed willing to meet them halfway. In a moment of profound realization, they understood they weren't facing a mindless threat but a highly advanced intelligence testing their worthiness for contact. The outcome of this encounter would determine not just their fate but potentially humanity's place in a much larger cosmic community. In the aftermath of their discovery, the station existed in a tense equilibrium. The crystalline intelligence maintained a perimeter around their position, neither advancing nor retreating. Robert and Jessica spent sleepless cycles documenting their observations, knowing their findings could redefine humanity's understanding of life itself. Yet the cost of their knowledge weighed heavily: the loss of their crewmates, the destruction of years of research, and the constant awareness that one misstep could reignite the conflict. They faced impossible decisions daily. Should they transmit their findings to Earth, risking panic or militarization of their discovery? Or should they keep the information contained, preserving the fragile peace they had established with the entity? Each choice carried monumental consequences, forcing them to weigh the greater good against their own survival instincts. The psychological strain manifested in subtle ways. Jessica found herself staring at the glowing patterns projected by the crystalline structures, searching for hidden meanings in their designs. Robert, meanwhile, struggled with the philosophical implications of their encounter. Was humanity ready for first contact? Or had they stumbled upon something too vast, too alien to fully comprehend? Despite the uncertainty, one thing was clear: their lives would never be the same. The experience had fundamentally changed their understanding of life, intelligence, and humanity's place in the universe. As they prepared for their eventual departure, they couldn't help but wonder what the future held, not just for them, but for all of humanity. The scientific implications of their encounter overwhelmed even their trained minds. If the crystalline intelligence represented an independent evolutionary path, it challenged fundamental assumptions about biology and consciousness. Jessica wrestled with reconciling their observations with established scientific principles, while Robert grappled with the philosophical ramifications of encountering genuine alien intelligence. Their debates ranged from practical concerns about containing such knowledge to existential questions about humanity's readiness for true first contact. Jessica spent hours poring over the data, her mind racing to piece together the puzzle. The crystalline structures exhibited traits of both biological and technological systems, blurring the line between organic life and artificial constructs. Their molecular composition defied conventional classification. Carbon-based chains intertwined with metallic elements in a lattice formation that seemed almost impossible to maintain thermodynamically. Yet, there it was, stable and self-replicating, evolving before their very eyes. What if this isn't just life? Jessica mused aloud, her voice trembling with a mixture of awe and unease. What if it's something else entirely? Robert looked up from his console, his expression thoughtful. Something else, he repeated slowly. Like what? A new category of existence? A hybrid form that transcends our understanding of biology and technology. Their discussions grew increasingly heated as they debated the implications. Was this evidence of extraterrestrial life, or had they stumbled upon some kind of artificial construct designed to mimic biological processes? The lack of clear answers only fueled their determination to dig deeper, even as the anomalies around them multiplied. Equipment malfunctions became more frequent, and the station's AI system began displaying erratic behavior, occasionally overriding manual commands without explanation. One evening, as Jessica reviewed footage from the lab cameras, she noticed something peculiar. The crystals weren't just growing, they were moving. Subtle shifts in their alignment suggested purposeful motion, as though they were responding to stimuli invisible to human senses. She replayed the footage multiple times, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and dread. Could it be true? Were they witnessing the emergence of a new form of consciousness? As they continued their analysis, the ethical dilemmas deepened. The organism's ability to communicate raised profound questions about its rights, if it indeed possessed sentience. Destroying it would be akin to genocide, yet every attempt to engage carried enormous risks. Could they trust it? Or was this another tactic to lull them into complacency? The weight of their responsibility threatened to crush them even as their understanding expanded exponentially. The psychological strain manifested in different ways for each survivor. Robert experienced vivid nightmares where human and crystal forms merged and shifted, blurring the lines between self and other. In his dreams, he found himself trapped within a crystalline lattice, his thoughts and memories dissolving into patterns of light. He woke drenched in sweat, the images lingering long after he opened his eyes. The dreams left him questioning his own identity. Was he still fully human, or had prolonged exposure to the entity begun to alter his consciousness? Jessica's struggles took a different form. She found herself compulsively analyzing every interaction with the entity, searching for hidden meanings in its patterns. Her mind raced constantly, replaying moments of contact and dissecting them for clues. Simple decisions became monumental challenges, and trust in her own judgment wavered. She began second-guessing everything, from the safety protocols she implemented to the data she collected, fearing that her perception might be compromised by the entity's influence. Isolation took its toll as they questioned whether their perceptions remained reliable or if prolonged exposure to the intelligence was altering their own consciousness. Simple decisions became monumental challenges, and trust in their own judgment wavered. They clung to their scientific training as an anchor against the rising tide of uncertainty and fear that threatened to consume them completely. One night, as they huddled together in their makeshift refuge, Jessica voiced what had been weighing heavily on both their minds. "We're not just fighting for survival," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're fighting to stay ourselves." Robert nodded, his expression grim but resolute. "Then we hold on to what makes us human, our curiosity, our resilience, our will to understand. No matter what happens, we don't let it take that away from us." Developing an escape plan proved more complex than anticipated. The crystalline intelligence seemed aware of their intentions, subtly manipulating their surroundings to discourage departure. Robert devised a strategy using remaining shuttle resources while Jessica worked on creating a protocol for safe extraction of critical data. They faced impossible choices about what knowledge to preserve and what to leave behind, knowing their decisions would shape humanity's future relationship with this alien intelligence. Time worked against them as station systems continued deteriorating, forcing them to balance thorough preparation with the urgency of their situation. Every step forward required careful consideration of potential consequences both immediate and long-term. They knew they couldn't delay indefinitely. The structural integrity of the station was compromised, and the weight of billions of tons of ice above them loomed like a ticking clock. Robert focused on modifying the shuttle systems to withstand potential interference from the crystalline entity. He reinforced the hull with additional shielding and rerouted power to critical systems, ensuring they could launch even if the entity attempted to disrupt their efforts. Meanwhile, Jessica prioritized securing the most vital data, encrypting it in layers to prevent unauthorized access. She agonized over what to include. Every byte of information was precious, but storage space was limited. Their final challenge came when they realized the entity was actively attempting to block their escape. Crystalline tendrils began creeping toward the shuttle bay, their movements deliberate and calculated. It was as if the organism understood their plans and sought to prevent them from leaving. Robert and Jessica worked tirelessly, fortifying the bay's defenses and setting up automated countermeasures to buy themselves time. "We can't let it win," Jessica said firmly, her voice steadier than it had been in days. "Not after everything we've been through." Robert nodded, his expression grim but determined. "Then we do whatever it takes. For science, for humanity, for ourselves." Their final actions would define not just their mission but potentially humanity's future. With limited time and resources, Robert and Jessica made the difficult decision to transmit their most crucial findings while destroying the rest, hoping to prevent misuse of their discoveries. As they prepared for departure, the crystalline intelligence demonstrated unexpected behavior, forming patterns that suggested understanding and perhaps even approval of their choices. The shuttle launch sequence initiated amidst a spectacular display of crystalline formations lighting up Callisto's dark sky. As they ascended toward rendezvous with the waiting Calisto, they knew their lives would never be the same. The experience had fundamentally changed their understanding of life, intelligence, and humanity's place in the universe. Back on Earth, their findings sparked a global debate about the ethics of first contact and humanity's readiness to engage with alien intelligences. Some hailed them as pioneers who had opened a new chapter in human history, while others warned of the dangers posed by such encounters. Robert and Jessica became reluctant celebrities, their names synonymous with courage and discovery. Yet despite the accolades, they remained haunted by the memory of Callisto, the shimmering crystals, the eerie glow, the sense of being watched by something far greater than themselves. They knew they had only scratched the surface of what lay beneath the moon's icy crust, and that knowledge filled them with equal parts wonder and dread. As they stood side by side at a press conference months later, fielding questions from reporters eager to understand their journey, Jessica turned to Robert and smiled faintly. "We did it," she said softly. "Against all odds, we survived." Robert nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "And maybe, just maybe, we gave humanity a chance to grow, to become something better." Remember to subscribe for more thrilling stories about humanity's encounters with the unknown.